Hi everybody, Dan Oman here, reminding you the DRF's Breeders' Cup package is all your handicapping essentials for racing's championship event. Includes DRF all-access PPs, clocker reports, betting strategies, and lots more. Get your package today at shop.drf.com.
Hi everyone, glad you've joined us for the Daily Racing Form Breeders' Cup webinar. I'm Brad Free, and I'm pleased to be joined by Andy Beyer and Steve Crist. Andy, Steve, thanks for joining us today.
We're glad to be here.
Happy to do it.
Well, I'd love to talk about your contributions to handicapping, the field of handicapping, and to thoroughbred racing in general, but we only have 1 hour. Here's what viewers need to know. Andy, Steve, and myself, we are all horse players, and we have a lot to get through over the next hour. We're going to talk about the 9 Breeders' Cup races on Saturday. We'll have a very brief question and answer session at the end. And I have to tell you, I'm looking forward to hearing Andy and Steve's selections, but more important than who they pick, I want to know the reasons why. And a lot of the information and tools that they use, and I do as well, are found in the pages of Daily Racing Form, including Beyer speed figures. So without further ado, let's start the handicapping discussion, and we're going to take them in race order, beginning with race number 4. It's the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint, 7 furlongs on the main track, a recently predictable race. Favorites won 4 of the last 5, 7 of the last 12. There's a look at the field. The morning line favorite, number 9, Ways and Means. Andy, the figures would suggest that Ways and Means and Second Choice Society have this race. It's their race to win or lose. What do you think?
Well, I think the morning line has the wrong favorite. Ways and Means is a good filly, and she's won 3 races in a row pretty comfortably. But when you look at them closely, they're not as impressive as they may meet the eye. I mean, she won a bottom level allowance race, then she won maybe the worst running of the test stakes in history in a 5-horse field. And then came back and won another stake where over a horse who ran second, who'd never won a stake before. Comparing those achievements with Society, I don't think she matches up. I mean, Society last time was in a stake and was in a head-and-head duel with a real fast Todd Pletcher filly, Money's Gold, and Society just buried her and drew away. Society's the one to beat, in my opinion.
Let's take a quick look at the Beyer speed figures of Society and Ways and Means. Andy makes a valid point with regards to Ways and Means. On numbers, last start numbers, they're very, very close. Ways and Means perhaps defeated a little bit lesser field, in Andy's opinion, than Society did. But on figs, anyway, they are very evenly matched. Steve, I think that you're maybe looking to attack this race from a different perspective. You like a filly who might be coming from a little bit out of it. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, these are the 2 fillies to beat. And to me, this is a race where I'm going to have 3 primary uses in the race in the pick anythings. The 2 favorites, and a long shot who I think has a chance in here, and that's number 8, Soul of an Angel. This is a filly who spent most of her life running 2 turns. And, I think she made 15 consecutive 2-turn starts, and then they turned her over to Saffie Joseph. And Saffie Joseph has a way of turning horses into new horses. And I think he did that with Soul of an Angel. They cut her back to 1 turn and ran her in the Ruffian, and she drowned randomized at 25-1, earning a Beyer speed figure of 98. Now, you do that well against one of the division leaders. You feel like, okay, maybe we've got a serious eclipse contender here. So they ran her in the Phipps and the Molly Pitcher and the Personal Ensign, and finally said, you know what? She's not really a distance or a 2-turn filly. Let's cut her back. And they cut her back to 7 furlongs in the Princess last time, where I think she ran a remarkable race that's not really captured by the 93 Beyer. She's the number 5 in the orange cap. She's already behind the field. And you don't see down the backstretch just how far out she really is. Now that's the 4 to 5 favorite on the lead, a speed horse, and Soul of an Angel just comes and catches her and drowns her. And if I agree with Andy, Ways and Means a little shaky. Society is a filly who she's in the form of her life and she's the one to beat, but she's not 100% dependable either. And at 12 to 1, I'm going to take my chances with Soul of an Angel.
All right.
I can't share your enthusiasm for her. I mean, I just, when I heard that you were, wanted to post the video of her, I watched it, and I think she was way back as she was because she doesn't have any speed. I mean, I don't think that's going to change on Saturday.
We shall see.
We shall see. Andy likes Society on top. Steve's making a case for a 12 to 1 shot named Soul of an Angel coming from Out of the Clouds. My top selection is number 10, Scylla, who's listed at 10 to 1. I think she's going to come down a little bit from there. That's the filly and mare sprint, race number 4. Race number 5, I'll be surprised if we end up with different selections in this field. It's a 5 furlong turf sprint and one of the lowest prices of the Breeders' Cup, and that's number 9, Cogburn, who's listed at 7 to 5 on the morning line. Steve, let's have you go ahead and get started. What about Cogburn in this 5 furlong dash?
I have no knocks on Cogburn. I mean, he may be the best turf sprinter I've seen. I think that he's a spectacular horse. He's found his niche, turf sprinting. Now, the one thing that you might have to be a little careful of, and if you're looking for backups, is that there are 2 other pretty serious speed horses in this race in Ag Bullet and Big Abs. I think Cogburn's better and quicker than them, and I expect him to win this race wire to wire. If he ends up in a 3-way duel, I'm not so sure. And, the closer who I think you have to take seriously is the Euro Brad Sell. I mean, he's a multiple Group 1 winner. Maybe he's, Europe's Cogburn. But I think Cogburn's maybe the most reliable favorite on this card.
Andy, do you agree with what Steve had just said?
I do. There is one horse in here that I'm certainly going to use in my exactas and maybe in a lesser position on my sequential bets, and that's Star of Mystery. Star of Mystery, 2 races back, ran a figure of 107. That number might be a little inflated, but it was still an excellent performance at Saratoga. And last time out, he would. The Comets has held up inside, knife through it, really didn't do justice to the trouble he had. He was on the rail in tight and then got shuffled back to last and came back and finished extremely well. If anything disrupts Cogburn in this race, and I think Star of Mystery is the horse who can pull a surprise.
Star of Mystery, a 3-year-old filly taking on the boys in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. She'll be rolling late. I agree with Andy and Steve. I think Cogburn is rock solid. Let's take a real quick look at Cogburn's PPs, and you can see what Andy and Steve have talked about. 107 last time, 114, and a 107 before that. I think he's the speed of the speed. I think he takes the lead and wires the field. I'll be looking to play him with some long shot closers in the exacta, but we all agree that Cogburn's going to be tough to beat in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. And another favorite coming up next in race number 6. It's the Breeders' Cup Distaff. A week and a half ago, I think we were all looking forward to a showdown between last year's Breeders' Cup Distaff winner, Idiomatic, and the star 3-year-old filly, Torpedo Anna. Unfortunately, Idiomatic was hurt and retired, so that leaves Torpedo Anna as the shortest price favorite on Breeders' Cup Saturday. She's a superstar 3-year-old filly with 4 Grade 1 wins this year, a terrific runner-up finish in the Travers. Andy, let's start with you. Is Torpedo Anna a lock in the Distaff?
No, I mean, my one reservation about her was that I wondered if that gut-wrenching effort in the Travers may have taken something out of her, because when she came out of there and then ran at Parks, she was life and death to beat a mediocre field. But this race, the reason this race confuses me maybe more than it should, is because of the presence of Awesome Result. And I think we all know by now that the Japanese horses are a major force in world racing, and you got to the performances they've delivered in this country since 2021. You make sure you understand you've got to pay attention to all of them. But I find it really hard to get a handle on some of them, just because dealing with the data that's available to us, it's much more difficult to assess the Japanese horses than it is the Euros. And Awesome Result has run 7 times. She's won them all. I tried to look up the horses she was beating, and I have no clue whether they were good or not. So her presence really confuses me here.
Very difficult to analyze. The one thing that is quite clear is she has never lost a race. So if she loses the distaff, it'll be the first time that she hasn't crossed the wire first in a horse race. It's also her first start in North America. Just as a reminder to everyone, the last time the Breeders' Cup was at Del Mar in 2021, a Japanese import won the Breeders' Cup distaff at $101. March Lorraine took advantage of a pace meltdown. The difference this year, I don't think there's any speed in this field. Steve, what's your take on the Breeders' Cup distaff? Does Torpedo Anna race gate to wire?
I really would like to beat Torpedo Anna, but I'm having a tough time doing it. Unlike some people, I don't think she's one of the greatest fillies ever to look through a bridle. I think if you take out that aberrant Travers figure, she's a nice 3-year-old filly, but she's not already in the Hall of Fame. Having said that, with all the older fillies having dropped out of this, the top 3 in the division, randomized to Dairy Manor and last year's champion, whose name I'm not remembering. Idiomatic. There are no quality older fillies in this race. And, if you're trying to beat Torpedo Anna, you're going to either Raging Sea or Candied, who on their best days aren't that far off, but, they're still not quite there. The thing that stopped me about Awesome Result, and maybe next year I'll have to do a deep dive on Japanese pattern racing, but I couldn't help noticing she's never run in a graded stake. And it's not like they don't have plenty of graded stakes over there. And if you look at, some of the fillies elsewhere on the card from Japan, there are these grade 1 and grade 2 races. And I don't know what these races that she's been in are like. Maybe they're just like listed stakes and allowance races.
Well, Awesome Result, 7 for 7. Torpedo Anna, the one I agree with what you had to say, Steve, with regard, she's a nice 3-year-old filly. I would also say she's the nicest 3-year-old filly this season, and she appears to me to be the controlling speed in a race that is likely, in my opinion anyway, to unfold at a relatively tepid clip. I think that Brian Hernandez is going to put Torpedo Anna on the lead. I think she's going to be very tough to catch. Do I want any part of her at 4-5? Not really, but I'm not all that thrilled to bet against her as well. So Torpedo Anna, the horse to beat. And by the way, if you just go by last start speed figures, her advantage is not that great. A 93 last time out. That is only 2 points higher than Candied, a 15-1 long shot, and Sugarfish, a 20-1 outsider in the Breeders' Cup distaff. So just based solely on last start figures, and you can take it for what it's worth, Torpedo Anna still has something to prove. And we're going to talk about that Travers figure when we get to our discussion of the Breeders' Cup Classic. For now, I think we all agree, Torpedo Anna, the horse to beat, and the mystery horse from Japan, Awesome Result might be one to potentially spring an upset. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Awesome Result goes off as the second favorite instead of Raging Sea. Okay, let's move along. Race number 7 is the Breeders' Cup Turf, and this is a field in which 7 of the 13 entrants made their last start in a foreign land. There's a look at the field, and the favorite on the morning line should be familiar to most horse players. Number 11, Rebels Romance. He won the Breeders' Cup Distaff 2 years ago. I remember doing the webinar with Andy, and we were kind of chuckling like, this horse that just won a Group 1 in Germany, who wins a prep race in Germany and wins the Breeders' Cup Turf? Well, it turns out that Rebels Romance, a pretty good horse. So we're going to start off with you, Steve. What about Rebels Romance in the Breeders' Cup Turf, or can you point us in a different, higher odds direction?
Well, I have no knock on Rebels Romance, but I don't think he has a tremendous edge over a few of these other Euros. I don't want any of the American horses. I mean, they're just not in the same universe as the Euros. But I think the inside 4 horses are all live in this race. I'll be using them and Rebels Romance. And the horse maybe you can help me with, Brad, because I think you like him. I don't get Jairib at all. He just seems, significantly slower than the other Europeans, but he's the 4-1 second choice on the morning line.
Well, here's what I like about Jairib. He's a developing 3-year-old who is improved as the season has unfolded. Is he in the same caliber as multiple Grade 1 winner Rebels Romance? Not yet, but when 3-year-olds get good in fall, I don't think we can really, determine what their ceiling is. I'm a little surprised that he's listed at 4-1. I think on the morning line that I made for Daily Racing Form, I may have listed him a little bit too low as well. I won't be surprised if Jairib moves up a little bit as far as the wagering goes. I also won't be surprised if he can give these older horses a battle in this race. I like Rebels Romance. Steve, just to clarify, you're going to be using the inside 4. Is Rebels Romance a toss on principle for you?
Oh, no. I will be going 5 deep in this race with those 4 and him. And, sort of my second choice and the horse who I'd go bet at 10-1 is Shahryar. I thought he was very strong. And, go back to last year's Breeders' Cup Turf. He runs 3rd to Auguste Rodin and up to the mark. I mean, either one of them, would be a huge contender in this race again.
Shahriyar's listed at 10-1. He's based much of the time in Japan. Andy, I know that you like to follow these Japan shippers into the Breeders' Cup. What about the Breeders' Cup Turf from your perspective?
Well, I picked Rebels Romance as well, and with Shahriyar second. They ran 1-2 in Dubai, and maybe I think they're there's no way to knock Rebels Romance. He's got good speed figures. He's got a great trainer, a tremendous overall record, and but these races that are full of Euros have foiled me for certainly the last 20 years in the Breeders' Cup, so I won't be shocked to be wrong. One quick observation pertaining to the 2 horse, the filly Emily Upjohn. She ran a very good race at Longchamp last time, but there had been a lot of rain in Paris around the time of the Arc, and the turf was soft, and some days I've seen the official designation was very soft, which you don't see too often. And I have the difference between running on soft turf and running on firm turf, as you'll get at Del Mar, is like night and day. And so I have looked closely at all the horses who raced at Longchamp in their last start, and I'm looking with a jaundiced eye on horses who ran well on the soft, and I'm willing to throw out bad efforts on that soft going at long shot. So no Emily Upjohn for me, but I mean this factor will arise in subsequent discussions of turf races.
I agree. We're going to talk about that in the Philly Mare Turf, I believe. As far as the Breeders' Cup Turf recent history, both Andy and Steve, you guys are right. The last 25 years, 20 Breeders' Cup Turf winners made their most recent start in Europe. 6 made their most recent start in the U.S. I know that adds up to 26. Yeah. There was a dead heat way back when. But from a virtual 3-to-1 ratio, Europeans typically dominate the Breeders' Cup Turf as opposed to the American horses. And I don't think there are any stars in the American Turf division, including Farm Bridge, you have nothing but respect for. But it probably goes through Europe, the Breeders' Cup Turf. Race number 8, right in the middle of the card, the Breeders' Cup Classic, the richest race of the day. Usually we kind of end the Breeders' Cup with the Breeders' Cup Classic. Not this year. The Breeders' Cup Classic is race number 8, and this field, boy, you talk about an eclectic field. We have a well-hyped European, a highly rated Travers winner, an older horse who popped with some big figs. Love him or hate him, you have to like the fact that City of Troy, Aidan O'Brien's best horse ever, is in the field. So, Andy, why don't you go ahead and get us started with the Breeders' Cup Classic and talk a little bit about
there's just so much European hype for this horse. I mean, saying he's Aidan's best doesn't do him justice with all the superlatives. Maybe the greatest horse who ever walked the earth. I don't know, but I'm not betting him. I mean, the thing you have to understand about this horse and his presence in the Breeders' Cup Classic is that the owners, the Coolmore Farm, they are really smart people, and they are willing to take a shot at running a turf horse on the dirt for the first time in his life because it's a free gamble. If the horse loses, well, he didn't like the dirt. He goes back to Ireland, stands at stud, and makes a fortune at stud. But if he wins or runs well on the dirt, he's got he becomes a valuable commodity in the North American market. Now, the trouble is this hasn't worked too well for them in the Classic. Aidan O'Brien is the winningest trainer in the Breeders' Cup, but his record in the Classic is 0 for 17. And in face of that statistic, I can't bet this horse.
Well, if you can't bet City of Troy, who can you bet, if anyone, in this race?
You know, there are a lot of unknowns in here, and I don't know quite what to make of Next, who has won all his races, but going like a mile and a half, is a different game from shorter distances, and there, I mean, all of the Japanese horses involve some level of question marks, and the horse that I've had a question mark over for his entire life is Fierceness. I think most of us who have followed his career, have thought of him as a horse who needs to have everything go right for him before he runs a big race. But I think that he, maybe I'm being too generous to him, but I think he's dispelled that reputation in his last couple starts. He's run solid figures that probably give him an edge in here, and I'm picking him with a certain amount of hesitation.
Andy Beyer's top pick is the Travers winner, Fierceness. He did beat a nice 3-year-old filly in a photo finish in the Travers, that being Torpedo Anna. Steve, what about you? The Breeders' Cup Classic, does it go through City of Troy, Fierceness, or some other horse?
Now, in City of Troy, I will use only very defensively. If I'm brilliant the rest of the day, I'm not going to let him beat me. But I think he's a very poor gamble, at anything like that 5-2 price. This is really kind of a head versus heart race for me because I've been a huge Fierceness fan, since he was a 2-year-old. And I've loved seeing him, redeem himself after he was dismissed as a phony and a, one-shot wonder. So it was great watching him win the Jim Denny and the Travers. I just, this is obviously a much tougher group than he met in the Travers. And then there are a couple horses I don't know what to do with. Next is such a cool and admirable horse and running in these marathon races, earning gigantic figures. Are we really going to be shocked if somehow it works out? I understand he hasn't run against these kind of horses and the pace is going to be very different, but he's a special horse and I can't help rooting for him. And the other horse, especially anything like 15-1 on the line. Arthur's Ride is not some, bum who got loose and lucky once. It's a seriously fast horse. And if he clears and goes to the lead with, say, Just Fierceness chasing him, I think he's going to last an awfully long time on the lead. So, I want a lot of coverage in this race.
I agree. This is a very perplexing race. Look, I picked City of Troy. I admit it's not a selection I'm proud of, and I might end up with egg on my face. But I will say this regarding Arthur's Ride. I picked him second because he is a fast horse, as Steve said. In fact, let's take a look at the recently highest speed figures earned by a few of these starters. Fierceness, last time out, a 111. Arthur's Ride, 3 back, a 111. Arthur's Ride, 2 back, a 110. Fierceness, and then Sierra Leone. Now, here's my question, and Andy, I hope that you can address this. The Travers figure came back huge, a 111 for Fierceness. The thing about it is, Torpedo Anna was in the photo. She had never run a figure anywhere close to that, nor had third place finisher Sierra Leone. So what do we make of a figure that comes back super high, one that horses...
I have some of the same questions, but that's what the figure came up. And, when we did our calculations, and the fact that Fierceness had earlier in the year had run a figure of 110, it wasn't like it was out of the question. So I have to accept it. Maybe it was a little high, but I've got to take it at face value. A comment about Arthur's Ride, and when we made that figure of 110, here was a horse with no credentials running in a low-level allowance race. Now he's as fast as any horse in the country. When he ran back, I bet him with confidence. I believed in the number, and he got a terrific ride, aggressive ride from Alvarado, who was just committed to put him on the lead, and took advantage of that loose lead, and and ran another number. But he, last time out in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, he got pressed. He had no excuses. I think he's seen his days of glory.
Could be. At 15-1, I'm willing to take the risk to find out. Travers winner, Fierceness, the great, mighty City of Troy. And next, I have to just throw in my 2 cents on next. I will be surprised if he wins. I know he's earned triple-digit figures in 7 consecutive races. This is a completely different ball game. 1.25 miles against some fast horses like Fierceness, supposedly City of Troy. I think that next is going to be faced with some pace pressure, the likes of which he has never seen. So I admire him like everyone else does, but I'll be surprised if he pops up and wins the race.
Yeah, you're right. Those longer races, it literally is a different game. You look at his fractions, 6 furlongs in 1:16, 6 furlongs in 1:14, 6 furlongs in 1:15. you know, that's, you know, it's relatively easy for him to run those good figures when he's got such soft scenarios all the time, you know, because of the pace that you get in those races. But I'm really dubious about him in this field.
There's a lot of question marks in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think that's one thing we all agree on. Fierceness, I won't be at all surprised if he goes favored. We didn't even talk about Forever Young, who I know a lot of people like. Guys, do you want to throw in just a quick little take on Forever Young, who probably was best in the Kentucky Derby this spring and had a good, solid recent comeback? Steve, how about you?
Well, I mean, I think he has to run a race that we haven't seen yet. Sure, he's got a lot of promise, and you could argue he was best in the Derby, but you know what? Best over a, you know, Perfect Trip Mystic Dan and a running sideways Sierra Leone. I mean, I can't, you know, just because he might have been better than the two of them that day doesn't put him in the winner's circle of the Breeders' Cup Classic for me.
Yeah.
Fair enough,
I'm not going to be shocked if any of the Japanese horses wins. And, you know, Forever Young is trained by the man who in 2021, brought two horses from out of the blue, one including that 50-1 that you mentioned earlier, Brad. But you can make, Dermisota Gaki, you know, almost won the Classic last year. And, these horses are all formidable. So I don't, you know, they all scare me, but I will grit my teeth and go with fierceness.
It's a puzzling race, the Breeders' Cup Classic. I'll leave you this one little tidbit. Since Del Mar replaced its main track approximately 10 years ago, there have been 12 mile and 1/4 races run at Del Mar. The most famous of them, obviously, the Pacific Classic every summer. 8 of them were won by the pace setter. 3 of them won by horses positioned second and third. Only 1 of the 12 won by a deep closer. So that's a challenge that some of these come from behinders, Sierra Leone, Forever Young, etc., face, trying to run down the front runners over a surface that is historically speed favoring. Okay, let's turn the page and go to race number 9 and another eclectic field on a card filled with eclectic fields. Fillies and mares, it's a turf marathon, and there's a 3-year-old upstart in here, a 7-year-old veteran, horses who have made their most recent start in New York, Canada, California, France, England, and Kentucky. 7 of the last 8 filly mare turf winners made their most recent start in another country. Steve, there are lots of ways to go. Is this another grass race in which a European is potentially the winner? What do you think?
Oh, potentially, absolutely. I think you want to start the discussion of this race by noting the distance of it for 2 reasons. At a mile and 3/8, that kept some of the better, you know, grass fillies and mares out of the race. If it had been a mile and 1/4, I think you would have had some different faces in the field. And the other thing about it is that very few of the fillies in this race, if you look down, have run this far. In the past, I think maybe only 3 or 4 out of the 13 have actually run a mile and 3/8. So, you know, just something to keep in mind as you're handicapping the race, you know, is who do you think is going to handle the distance? Now, you know, the morning line favorite, Whirl Like Goddess, absolutely can. I mean, if anything, you would say, well, gee, she'd prefer another furlong because, you know, a mile and a half really is her wheelhouse. But I have nothing to say against her. I think she's better than most of these. I think she'll run just fine at a mile and 3/8. And I think the main competition, you know, is going to come from the Europeans. My second choice in the race, though, would be Moira, who I think she's a little bit quicker than you know, many of these. And I think 8-1 is a very fair price on her.
Moira at 8-1, Whirl Like Goddess at 5-2. Andy, what do you think about the filly and mare turf?
This is the kind of race that I will usually lose, but and probably will again this year. I picked Cinderella's Dream with hesitation because a development in racing that I just don't like, or the proliferation of stakes races for 3-year-olds that, give them names that, like the Belmont Oaks Invitational that make them sound significant, and the quality of competition is often very mediocre. But Cinderella's Dream in her 2 starts in that Belmont Oaks and then the Saratoga Oaks, both times was in very disadvantageous pace situations, and nevertheless closed powerfully both times. I thought she was visually impressive. She's got a trainer who's exceptionally successful in the Breeders' Cup in Charles Appleby. So that's my hesitant selection here.
Charlie Appleby is 10 for 20 in the Breeders' Cup, an amazing statistic. Cinderella's Dream will be facing Older for the first time. Much tougher company. Warlike Goddess, the 7-year-old veteran. I went with the horse that, Andy, you kind of alluded to earlier a little bit, and her name is Content, and she ran horribly in both recent starts. But both those starts, she's a European filly, were on soft ground. She's going to get some quick, firm ground on Saturday. I look for Content to maybe run back to her Group 1 race 3 starts back. It was in summer, and if she does, I think she's good enough to possibly handle Warlike Goddess and company.
Yeah.
Deep field. Race number 10 is the Breeders' Cup Sprint. 6 furlongs on the main track. Speed, speed, and more speed. Andy, I've never seen so much gas in one.
Right there. There are at least 6 confirmed front runners in this field, and I'm not going to try to buck that evidence. I wanted to get a closer, and I wanted to get a closer exacta, and my exacta is going to be a Nakatomi and Remake. Nakatomi, 2 races back, got a figure of 105 winning at Saratoga. Last time out was on a very speed favoring track at Keeneland. Managed to close to finish second. I think he's got the edge, and I'm certainly going to. Here's a good chance to give a look to a Japanese horse. I mean, Remake, ran. Very well in Saudi Arabia, winning that Riyadh dirt sprint, and has got good solid Japanese form. I think he's and he's a closer. That's my exacta.
Steve, what about you? Are you going with somebody coming from behind in a race that has to unfold at
my only fear is that Nakatomi's going to be 2-1. I mean, everyone seems to like Nakatomi because everyone, can see the just how much one-way speed there is in here. Having said that, he's my selection. I think he's the best of the closers. A horse I'm going to use underneath, because, when these races fall apart, they can really fall apart, is Gun Pilot, who I think is, one of the few other late runners in the race. He's going to be a very big price. The other horse who I'll mention, because they're not all going to go on a suicide mission. I mean, if any of the apparent speeds can take off and has proven he's able to run, at least a little bit from behind, would be Mulligan. So I'm going to use a little Mulligan. I don't think Flavian Pratt's going to get caught up in a 6-way duel. Whereas I think, horses like Scully and Straight No Chaser and Federal Judge, they're absolutely committed. Maybe Mulligan isn't quite as committed.
No, I think you're right about the price because I also like Nakatomi. So I think we can kiss that 6-1 goodbye. Everybody saw what everybody saw at Keeneland, and that's a horse take back and run a lot better than the figure or his finish position may have suggested. And Steve, I'm with you as far as Gun Pilot's my second choice. Very evenly matched field in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And here's to take a quick peek at how evenly matched this field is. Federal, Judge, Mulligan, Raging Torn, Straight No Chaser, Skelly, all within 3 points of one another. They all earned their figures setting the pace. So something has to give in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. We all like Nakatomi. So does everybody. That's the Breeders' Cup Sprint, which is race number 10. Race 11 is the Breeders' Cup Mile, a mile on grass. Morning line favorite, the tepid choice on the morning line. Number 6, Notable Speech, in from Europe. Steve, who's better at a mile on turf, Europeans or Americans?
Europeans, always.
Yeah. Who do you like?
I like 3 horses in this race. I mean, if I get this far, I hope to be alive to Ramatuelle, to Notable Speech, and to Carl Spackler. And I wish someone would explain to me why I should use Porta Fortuna and why she is the second choice here at 4-1, has been running against clearly inferior fillies and earning poor figures.
I can't come up with a reason for that. Porta Fortuna is a toss for Steve. Andy, what about you in the Breeders' Cup Mile? I'm sure this is your.
When I was making my notes before this webinar, I wrote on the PPs, I have no clue. And this is so evenly matched, but under such circumstances, I'm willing to take a shot on a 20-1 shot, and I'm going to use More Than Looks. He has been in 2 good grade run races in his last 2 starts that Carl Spackler won. Both times the pace, well, 2 races back, the pace was a crawl. And last time, the pace was very tepid. And when More Than Looks rallied in both these races, if you look at calculate his fractions, last quarter in 23, a last quarter, and I think 22.55. This horse could really motor at the end. And with the speedy Goliath in this field, you're, I think, pretty much assured an honest pace. So this is my little shot for a long shot glory in the Breeders' Cup.
Bombs away for trainer Cherie DeVaux. I'm going to go with the Cherie DeVaux long shot in the final Breeders' Cup race, but this Breeders' Cup Mile probably goes through Europeans. Steve looking for an upset by the late runner More Than Looks, and Carl Spackler favored on the morning line, or excuse me, Notable Speech. Carl Spackler, the top American horse. Okay, the finale, it's race number 12. It's the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, and a tough post for Skippy Longstocking, and a tough distance for Domestic Product, who seems best around 1 turn. Andy, what do you do in this mishmash of a finale?
Well, there's a ton of speed in here, and I'm going to play an exact of 2 closers, 9 and 8, Domestic Product and Post Time. I mean, Domestic Product certainly looks like he's going to be well suited to coming off the pace at a mile, and ran a figure of 106 in his last. Post Time, has run figures multiple times that would be very competitive with Domestic Product. 105 in the Whitney at Saratoga. His last race at Laurel was just a kind of a cakewalk. We won by 11, so I don't think the figure really matters much there. But these are 2 horses who are going to be running at the end, get a good pace scenario, and fit well on the figs.
Steve, where do you go in the Dirt Mile?
I like the same 2 horses that Andy does, and I'm going to use one speed horse, just who I have a lot of respect for. if Saudi Crown can get loose from the rail, he's going to be very tough. And, how many horses is Irad going to take out from post 14 trying to get, near him? I think Saudi Crown it is kind of an underrated horse. I think he is the speed of the speeds. So, if I were structuring a ticket, I'd sort of be A, 8, 9, and B, Saudi Crown.
Guys, we're going to have a Q&A segment in just a couple minutes here, but I want to ask you both a question because you both like domestic product for legitimate reasons, including the 106 Beyer that he earned last time out. That was around one turn. We're going 2 turns on Saturday. How much of a challenge is it to you guys, or am I just being a skeptic just to be a skeptic? Either one. Andy, what about you?
I don't put a lot of emphasis on that factor. I mean, to me, a mile is a mile. I'm sure we know there are horses who are probably better at at one turn than 2, but I can't cut it fine enough to make a decision based on that. And domestic product has won around 2 turns, and I think he's the horse who fits here.
All right. And Steve, I know you like Post Time as a potential upsetter. The Crazy Bomb, my one crazy horse on Saturday, is number 11, Cagliostro. I know he's not fast enough on numbers, but to me, this is an inscrutable race. I think it's begging to be won by a chaotic long shot. He's run well under compromising circumstances, in my opinion. And if Andy can get Cherie DeVaux home with more than looks in the mile, maybe I can do the same in the dirt mile with Cagliostro at odds of 30-1. Okay, that's the 9 Breeders' Cup races on Saturday. It's time for a real quick question and answer session. Thank you. This is from a viewer somewhere. Thank you for your lifelong pursuits to help educate handicappers in Saturday's races. Is there one race you expect to have a lightning fast pace or one race void of speed? Steve, do you want to take this one?
Sure. I expect the sprint to have a lightning fast pace. I think you've got several really committed one-way horses. And I guess the race void of speed could be the distaff. It was the older fillies who aren't in the race who really brought the speed to the party. But, we were talking about maybe Torpedo Anna ends up on the lead, but I don't know, with Irad on and blinkers on, candied from the rail, maybe she goes. But there's really, no apparent, excess of speed in that race.
I agree. The sprint, hot pace, the distaff, potentially a tepid pace. The next question is, I was never a huge Sierra Leone fan, but wonder how decent a value he will be for this race. Do you think it's possible for him to flip the Derby results and hold off Forever Young? Andy, what do you think about
Well,
Sierra?
there are a lot of other horses to hold off as well. I mean, Sierra Leone he's just so often been a victim of his style. Horses who are going to be coming from the clouds in large fields are often going to have difficulties. I've lost my share of money on him during this 3-year-old campaign. I think that one of these days he's going to get a situation where he gets a good setup and a clean trip, and I certainly wouldn't rule him out on Saturday.
He's going to have to overcome a track surface that historically favors forwardly placed horses at 1.25 miles. The next question, is there any kind of track bias at Del Mar? And if so, does it favor front runners or closers, insiders or outside? I'll take this one because California is kind of my home track. During the summer meet, the 2024 summer meet is one of the most blatant inside speed race tracks, talking about the main track in recent years. If you rallied wide, most of the time you had no chance. Now, the weather is cooler. It's been a couple months since the summer meet closed. We're recording this before a single race has been run over the main track this fall. So I'm a little hesitant to proclaim there's going to be a bias this fall. I can only say that historically, 1.25 mile races go to front runners. And this summer, you couldn't win from behind. What it's going to play like Thursday forward is kind of one of the unknowns. So we're going to have to take a look at what happens on Thursday before we attack the Breeders' Cup races on Friday and Saturday. Next question is, do you think having the Breeders' Cup at Del Mar favors the West Coast horses? Either one of you guys can take this one.
Well, in the past, you might have said yes, but there's just, I hate to say it because I've always loved California racing, but there's just been such a decline in the quality of competition in the West that, we haven't talked a whole lot about California horses, and I don't think we've mentioned Bob Baffert in this entire webinar. So it's I don't think West Coast horses are going to be favored.
No, I think we saw that last year. I mean, with Santa Anita, I mean, there were no prominent West Coast horses, and I thought last year's Breeders' Cup was like one of the fairest, maybe the fairest Breeders' Cup ever. I mean, everybody ran. The Eastern horses ran, the Midwestern horses ran, and there wasn't much to begin with the California horses, and they were frankly awful.
Yeah, I hate to hear you guys say that, but it's true. And we've been watching the decline of California over the last decade or so, and it's reached an all-time low. Up in the press box, we were kind of talking about what's the over-under for California horses to win a Breeders' Cup race, and I put the number at 1/2. I think you get action on both sides. If there's one California-based horse that wins, that would be the over, but I would think I would bet the unders and come up with a blank for California again. It's just the quality of horses in California does not compare to the East, the Midwest, and overseas. Next question is, are speed figures as accurate when dealing with 2-year-old horses for handicapping purposes? Andy?
I would say yes and no. The figures, are as accurate as for 2-year-olds as for 3 and 4-year-olds, but because 2-year-olds can improve so dramatically with experience, just from the first start to the second start of their careers, that a figure for a lightly raced 2-year-old will not be as predictive as a figure, say, for fierceness, who's got a long resume.
Very good. Next question is, with Euros, we don't get the same amount of past performance information than we do in the U.S. How do you evaluate them? Well, I mean, clearly, I think class is a huge factor, and I think they just have better grass horses overseas. Steve, you want to elaborate at all on this question?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, terribly scientific, but I think you can kind of equate the time form ratings to Beyer figures. I mean, people have differences of opinion, but, somewhere in the -16 to 18 area at least puts you in the ballpark, of comparing them that way.
When I'm trying to evaluate the Euros, I always use the Racing Post website, which will give you, the PPs of every horse in any race. And so if you see a horse who has just won a race in Epsom or whatever, you can look and see, who ran second, who ran third. Were those like graded stakes horses, or were they ordinary horses? So you can really kind of, you can do some basic classifying and get a picture of what kind of competition the horse has been meeting. As I say, I regrettably haven't been able to find comparable information for Japan, so I'm flying a little blind for those horses.
The Racing Post website is a terrific website. It's similar in some regards to Daily Racing Form's Formulator program. You can look up who horses ran against, what their form looked like before and since. Daily Racing Form's formulator program has a lot more information, but Racing Post, a good place to start for Europeans.
And we should tell our listeners, if they don't know it, it's free.
And it's free, exactly. You don't even need to give them your email address. I love that. Who is the most vulnerable favorite? Wow, that's a tough one. Steve, how about you? I hit you blindsided with that one, I know.
I guess City of Troy.
Yeah.
Obviously he's a very good horse, but in this kind of field, making your first career start on dirt, I don't want a horse like that as the favorite.
Andy?
I'd give the same answer. I mean, the Aidan O'Brien 0 for 17 and the classic stat, would make this horse pretty vulnerable.
Having picked City of Troy on top in the Breeders' Cup Classic, I hate to say it, but I agree with both Andy and Steve. I also want to thank you both for spending an hour talking about the 2024 Breeders' Cup at Del Mar. Andy Beyer, Steve Crist, I'm Brad Free. Good luck this Saturday and Friday as well at the Breeders' Cup, and we will see you soon in the pages of Daily Racing Form. Thanks for watching.
Win big with new DRF All Access past performances. With one best-in-class product, you now get all 3 past performance formats. Go to DRF.com and use coupon code 1FREEPP for a free single